Good morning, early birds. How are you? I know I don't look that great right now, but I did wash my hair before I went to bed, and that's sometimes what happens. So there's the hair story. Let's just get it out of the way. We just need to get the hair story out of the way. Dr. Annette Feravich. Oh my goodness gracious. I can't look at my hair for very long. It is all clean though. It is. And I am here with the early bird classroom. And it has been just a terrible, well, it hasn't been terrible. Who cares, right? But it was raining all night. It was raining the entire night. And it's still gray and cool outside here in Michigan. And, but I have my coffee on. My hair is clean. Did you wash your face and brush your teeth? I did not yet. I really didn't. I didn't. But I did get everything ready. Let's get going. Let's not talk. But we do want to make sure you have breakfast, and we want to make sure you get ready for the day. I'm halfway ready for the day. I have my lights on. That light is facing that way. But it's working. But it's working. All right, let's talk about what we've got going on. I don't have my flowers here because that's not going on right now. They're over there, but I'll get them. I'm not worried about them right now. What I am worried about is making sure that you're ready tomorrow for science. So, oh, jeez, I spent a good time yesterday getting all this ready. I don't want to dump it right in front of you. Oh, okay. So tomorrow is science, and tomorrow in science, we are going to do a project, and the project has to do with the scientific method. And what I want to make that a little bit smaller. Do is get you a good to-do list for you to work from for tomorrow. All right. So you're all ready to do what we want to do tomorrow. Now, for our science tomorrow, what we're doing is the scientific method, if you remember that. And we've been doing a lot of observation, right? Asking questions and observing, right? Although that's not the one that I necessarily have observations and questions, but that's what we need to do. We need to observe first, and that gets us to ask questions. Why does that work that way? How does that happen? I don't even know. I'm reading my cell phone. How does that even happen, right? So we need to ask, we need to observe things first, and then we ask questions. But when we're a scientist, what we have to do is we have to learn to follow directions. We have to learn to follow rules. Now, there are a lot of ways for us to follow rules. One way is that, to practice following rules. One way would be to do scientific experiments. That would be a way to teach us how to follow directions. Listening to a teacher. Did you get your homework done correctly? Did you read the directions on your homework? That's another way to practice following directions. Another way to practice following directions is recipes. That's how I got my kids to follow directions. Is what I would do is they would get a night where they had to cook. So it was their night to cook. I bought them a kid's cookbook so that they could do easy recipes, and I got prepared for eating things I might not, that weren't gourmet. They were still really good. They were really good, and my kids really enjoyed it. And that is how you also learn to follow directions exactly. And one of the things that I do when I do a project or when I make a casserole that I have to follow directions for is I always follow the directions exactly the way they have them. And then I decide I want to switch them up some way, right? But first of all, almost always I follow the directions that they have first, and then I decide if I want to change them. That's what we do as scientists. We do the same thing. We follow somebody else's directions to do a study. Maybe part of the directions here, part of the directions there, right? Because we're sometimes putting together and studying new things, right? Often we're studying new things. So we might have to take, maybe nobody's done this before. So there isn't just one set of directions. Sometimes we have to take directions from here and there, right? Okay. And then we change things up. That's how we change things up. We take some directions from here, some directions from there, and then we change them up. And we get a new recipe for doing our studies and our experiments. All right? So these are the things that you need, but these are the things that you need right here. All right? So, starting with getting a good notebook and a good pen. There's no better writing than writing with a great pen. And a lot of times, maybe you type everything right away. Cool, that's great, you can do that, right? But a lot of times I don't have my computer with me, and I don't even have my phone with me to type things in, all right? And so get a good pen. If you're a writer, I think it's a great way to learn to write or to transcribe things in different ways, right? Maybe you literally transcribe your voice recording to remember something. Maybe you transcribe it by writing it down. Maybe you transcribe it by typing it, right? But one way or another, you really learn by transcribing, by writing, all right? Get a notebook and a pen. Here's my pretty notebook. I went out yesterday and I bought some new notebooks. I always buy notebooks. I buy them a lot. I love them when they were on sale. They were a great price at Rite Aid. I forgot that Rite Aid has such great prices. I forgot. And they do. So yeah, and when I buy these, I think that they plant a tree. These were really inexpensive. Buy one, get one for free or 50% off. I can't remember, one of the two. So here's my new notebook. And here I've got my very first items, science methodology for what we needed to do. I have my supply list, so I stopped writing there. But I got one in black, I got one in blue, and I got one in pink as well. Look, isn't it? So the black one looks like this, but only very sparkly. I have to show you that it is sparkly. Okay. What we are going to do tomorrow is we're going to make some crafts. So these are the crafts that we're making. We're going to make flowers. So I have no flowers here. You know how much I love flowers. I did buy flowers. I don't have them out yet, but that's okay because we've got our art project out. So we're going to make these flowers and we're going to make this little firefly up there as well. So flowers and a firefly. So we need these tools tomorrow if you want to make them with me. Now, I understand that you might not get a chance to get everything that you want to make this by tomorrow. And but remember, the video will be up there, so you'll have time to get them and then sit down and you can make them with me whenever you have your supplies. All right? Let me show you some of the supplies I bought. So, let's see. So a notebook, a ruler. I bought a ruler. It was on sale at Kroger. I was so happy too. It was on sale at Kroger for only $1. So school supplies, it's so funny. Like rulers could be like so expensive, but if you get school supplies when they are on sale right before school, you can get them for a really good price. So I got a ruler for only $1. I was really happy about it. And most of my rulers that I have, the numbers are coming off, so you can't see the numbers. And when we start doing measurements with a ruler, I needed a good ruler, so I bought a ruler. You're going to need some colored paper. I have lots of colored paper because I'm a teacher and I taught all different ages. So I always have colored paper. If your mom has been any kind of a crafter at all, she'll probably have a lot of these supplies just like I did. The one thing I couldn't find was I couldn't find any pipe cleaners. So look for some pipe cleaners because, why did I close that? Because you'll need some pipe cleaners. Like here's a pipe cleaner right there. And this is like a little pipe cleaner. I wouldn't necessarily have to use those. I could probably find something, but I do like that pipe cleaner right there. So, so pipe cleaners, which I didn't have, but I do have colored paper and colored tissue paper because these poppies, they have the red poppy here, right? That's made out of tissue paper. I've got red tissue paper. I've got pink tissue paper. I have yellow tissue paper. And I even got this nice sparkly white tissue paper that I'm going to use. I cut out, what else do we have there? So colored paper, tissue paper. I had these because I was making with an elementary class a chain. So I had these, and so we were doing chain links, right? The weakest link in a chain. And so this is how we made the chain. So I cut up all these pieces of paper to make a chain, and I had all of these pieces of paper left. So I cut them in half, long ways like this. And then I cut them into, in half so that they're in thin strips. So I have got my thin strips ready for this flower here. This one here. So I have that ready for tomorrow. Paper cupcake insert. I don't know what these are called. What are they called? Baking cups. Cupcake baking cups, right? So that's what I got here. So I couldn't find any really bright yellow ones. One of the things I noticed is if I keep 2 or 3 of these cupcakes together, they look a little bit better. So I got the cupcakes. Let's see here. Glue, straws. I bought straws. I haven't decided what glue I'm going to use. I might use the stuff that sticks your fingers, crazy glue. I might do that. So I bought straws, but look at what I did with the straws. Straws, paint. Here are my paints that I love. Because you know what else is in this paint? Look at what's in this paint. White. White. And they're markers. And they work like markers. So here were my paints. I bought these quite a while ago. But I use them all the time. You might even want to use Sharpies. So permanent Sharpie markers are also helpful. But I like the paints. Sharpies don't come in white. Paints do. So there's my paints. And look at what I did to the straws. Last night I spent time painting my straws. So here I bought these clear color straws. And you can keep them clear. You don't have to paint your straws. I wanted to paint my straws, so I did. And so there's my straws. Ready for action. Ready for it. So some stripes. This one I put little yellow flowers on. This one I put, look at, a candy stripe all the way down that one. This one I put red flowers on over here. This one, orange dots, and sometimes I circled them with green, just because I wanted to. This one's stripes. Look at stripes. So, and here I have got this one I started with white dots on it, right? So just take your time, and they don't have to be perfect. Look at this. Look at this pink stripe. That looks awful, but it's cool. So it doesn't look awful. So here are our straws that are decorated for the flower stems. All right. And look what I found at Kroger, if you can believe that. Right at Kroger in their, I think it was in their craft section. It could have been in their school section, but I don't think so. I think it was there was a crafty section there. So there, I bought those. And those will be the insides of my flowers, right? So then I can put those inside. So this I changed a little bit. I can put those inside any one of those flowers here. Let's get it down this way, right? I can put a yellow one inside the daffodil here, right? I can put a yellow one here inside the daisy. I can put a purple one if I want to inside the poppy. All right, so, and then the other thing I did was I cut out of cardboard the shapes I'm going to need. So for the K lily, it tells me the shape I'm going to need. Calla lily. It tells me the shape I'm going to need. It says cut a large triangle with 3 equal sides from paper. Round the points. So here, they cut that from the purple paper here, right? Well, what I did was I cut 3 different sizes. I didn't know how big I wanted my K lily, and I knew I wanted more than one. So out of cardboard, I made my traceable stencil. Now I can trace this on colored paper. And I made 3 sizes so I can have 3 different sizes of my K lily. All right? I'll use this and I'll trace these out on papers and I'll make all different kinds. I'll trace these out on the paper and I'll make all different colors of my different flowers. So here, this one needs, the daisy needs the paper cups, but I couldn't find bright yellow ones like that. So I'm going to have to compromise or adjust this a little bit. Here are our Kayla lilies. So I made those different. For our daisies, I also made a stencil. It doesn't look our daffodils. It doesn't look exactly like this. I had a lot of trouble with it. You might be able to make it on the computer a little better. So I tried a few of these. What I noticed that I liked when this was pointed. I liked it more pointed. Here's one that I made that's a little bit closer. I didn't like what they looked like when I put them together. I tried a few and cut a few out, as you can see here. I noticed when I put the yellows together like this, I got a darker yellow. So that's what I liked, was putting more than one together. And then here you can see in the blue, I've got the diamond shaped a little bit more. And when I turn them, they look more like daffodils, cutting the diamond shape. So I liked the diamond shaped better. Okay, anything else here? Scissors. And that's it. So there's your list. There's your list. And you can make these flowers with me. The science project tomorrow is following directions. As scientists, we have to learn to follow directions. So that's what we're doing tomorrow. I hope you join me. Okay, let's move these aside. Well, I'll just leave them back there for you. I might even take some of these petals and do something with them. The colors of real petals are just extraordinary, aren't they? I might do something with the petals since I have always so many of them, and they're just absolutely beautiful. We'll see. Okay, let's get going. Today I promised I would read to you, right? So today we're going to read. We'll see how far we get. We'll finish the story tomorrow. This week we have got, so tomorrow is science, and then on Thursday we are doing Roman numerals, subtraction, and Roman numerals. Look what I picked up for you guys. I picked something else up for you. It was only $1.50 at Kroger. I know. I couldn't believe it. What is going on here? Put things back where you got them from. I'm going to put all these back so I have everything together. Okay, so I just want to show you. Remember, If you're in first grade, you want to learn your basic facts. You want to learn your basic math facts. If you're in second grade, you might want to be doing Roman numerals are a great thing to memorize in second grade. Great thing. So we'll be doing that on Thursday. But also, I got this from Kroger. And let me just show you how when you learn your basic math facts, remember we talked about those basic math facts. I don't know if I'll be able to find them. I might be able to. Let's see. Oh my gosh. Look at that. Basic math facts right there. There's our basic math facts. All right. We're going to be working on these on Thursday. When we learn our basic math facts for addition, when we learn these, we want to memorize these so that we know that 8 plus 2 equals 10. And when we know 8 plus 2 equals 10, what we also know is that 10 minus... We also know that 10 minus 8 equals 2. Why? Because 2 plus 8 equals 10. See how we use our can't talk this morning. Our basic math facts. See how we use our basic math facts of addition, even for subtraction? Why? Because they're all part of the same family. We'll talk about that on Thursday. So I got this from Kroger. It was only $1.50, and there are 8 of these in there. So we're going to get some subtraction going. Subtraction and Roman numerals on Thursday. All right? All right, let's keep going here with our story. So now I said I was going to read. Remember that in the Bookless classroom, we're talking about the Civil War. And so we talk about a lot of the topics in all different... Believe what my hair looks like. So we talk about this in all of our different classes in different ways. In our critical thinking class, we're talking about slavery. In our spiritual classroom, we're talking about the dignity of the human being. So this Civil War topic that we've been talking about, and we're going to go over, we still have some time on it. And we'll talk about it in the Bookless classroom, what else we're going to be doing with it. But the Civil War defines our country. It more than any other event, more than any other war, it is the Civil War that defines our country. Come into the Bookless classroom and find out why it defines our country. So we are spending a long time on it. And then what we're going to do in our Bookless classroom, after we are getting closer to done with our Civil War, we're going to go look at Europe and see what was going on in Europe with the same problems we had in the United States. All right? But let's get going with the story of the Underground Railroad by R. Conrad Stein. He's one of my favorite authors from the Cornerstones of Freedom book series. 1981. Tice Davids ran for his life. Behind him, his master tramped over the fields. The master carried a shotgun. Davids raced up a hill. Thorns tore his clothing and scratched his skin. At the top of the hill, the runaway slave stopped and gasped. He saw what seemed like a miracle. Below him, the broad Ohio River flowed gently. This river had been his goal for days, ever since he had broken away from his Kentucky plantation. It was his gateway to freedom. Davids had no time to stop and stare at the river. He could hear his master's voice in the distance behind him. "Davids, stop where you are!" Tice Davids ran down the hill and plunged into the icy water. Tice's master searched the bank for a rowboat. Finding one, he began to row across the Ohio. As he rowed, he kept an eye on his slave, swimming in the current. Can you imagine being seen the whole time? At least if you were hidden, but he was watching him. The Ohio River was a border between the state of Kentucky and the state of Ohio. Slavery was illegal in Ohio, but the law allowed a slave owner to enter another state in order to catch a runaway slave. David's master had the legal right to capture him and take him back to Kentucky in chains. Still, David swam the river. Other slaves had told him that he would find help in Ohio. There he would find people who believed slavery was sinful. They had helped other slaves escape. David splashed out of the water and struggled up the bank. Ahead he saw a dozen white frame houses. He ran towards them, hoping he would find help. David's was lucky. He had reached the town of Ripley, Ohio. The people of Ripley hated slavery. The Rankin family lived in Ripley. John Rankin was a huge farmer who had 7 sons. The entire family hated even the idea of slavery. During the day, each family member took a turn keeping an eye on the river. They watched for runaway slaves. At night, the Rankins left a lantern burning on their porch. The light was a signal. It told fleeing slaves that help could be found in this house. David's ran through a back street. Suddenly he heard someone call, "Over here! Over here!" He looked up and saw one of Rankin's sons. The young man was holding open the door of the Rankin house. He motioned David's inside. The boat rowed by the slave owner bumped into the mud on the Ohio side of the river. The slave owner climbed out. He was sure he had his slave cornered. Capturing him now would be an easy task. But after a 4-hour search, the slave owner stood on the main street of Ripley, scratching his head in confusion. His slave was nowhere to be found, and no one in the tiny town claimed to have seen him. Tice Davids was hiding in the cellar of John Rankin's house. Later that night, Rankin gave David some money and food. He told him of another house 10 miles up the road where he could find shelter. Davids was amazed to discover that an entire network of houses where he could find help was spread out between the town of Ripley, Ohio, and his final destination, Canada. Why Canada? Because here in the United States, even though slavery was illegal in the northern states, they were forced to return slaves back to the South. So they could not get, a slave couldn't get freedom until they got all the way to Canada. That was the laws in the United States, and that wasn't that long ago. Although it seems like a long time ago. Davids escaped from his master in 1831. He was just one of thousands who broke the chains of slavery in the years before the Civil War. But David's escape is remembered because it helped create a name for the escape route. When David's bewildered owner returned to Kentucky, he told a neighbor about David's disappearance. The slave owner said that David's had slipped away when he was almost in his grasp. "I don't know how he did it," said the owner. "He must have gone off on some underground road." Another slave overheard his master. Soon slaves all over the South spoke in hushed tones about the underground road up north. Somehow the words underground road became underground railroad, and the new term was born. The thousands of heroic men and women who daily risked their lives to help slaves on the path to freedom suddenly had a name. They were all agents of the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad became one of the great adventures in American history. It was a railroad in the sense that it transported people, but it had no tracks or cars. And it had only one destination: freedom. Slaves had attempted to escape captivity ever since they were first brought to North America in the 1600s, 1619 if you remember. Some of them managed to break away from their masters and live in small colonies in the swamps and forests. Other runaways discovered they were accepted by Indian tribes. The first spike in the Underground Railroad was driven by the first American who helped a slave reach freedom. It's only words. Reach freedom. Exactly what happened is unknown, but it certainly goes back to the very beginnings of the United States history. As early as 1796, President George Washington, who owned slaves, wrote a letter on the subject to a friend. In the letter, Washington complained that one of his servants had escaped and was living in New Hampshire under the protection of people of a certain town. The townspeople had not only helped the slave escape, but they were willing to fight to keep him free. The president wrote that he would not order the authorities to capture the slave because he was afraid such an act would excite a mob or riot. Soon after the Revolutionary War, the United States became divided. The free state became divided between the free states of the North and the slave states of the South. It was the start of bitter feelings between pro-slavery and anti-slavery Americans. At first, the voices raised against slavery were nothing more than a whisper. Still, thousands of Americans in both the North and the South believed that slavery was evil. Many of these people devoted their lives to abolishing or removing it from their country. Some of these people reasoned that the best way to destroy slavery was to help slaves escape to freedom. Their courage created the Underground Railroad. When the term Underground Railroad came into use, the anti-slavery agents began using railroad language to describe their work. Thus, those who served as guides for escaped slaves became conductors. The houses giving shelter to runaways were called stations. The man or woman who owned the house was called the station master. And the escaped slaves were the passengers. So they had the conductors. They served as guides. They had stations, the houses. They had station masters, the people who owned the houses, and passengers were the slaves who escaped. That's interesting. A few famous Underground Railroad names will always be remembered, but most agents lived and worked in secrecy. Today, we think of the men and women who were devoted to helping slaves escape as heroes. Before the Civil War, however, anyone assisting an escaped slave was committing a dangerous criminal act. If caught, he could be sent to prison. He could even be put to death. So they were forced to return those slaves, otherwise they had to suffer great penalties. Easily the most dangerous job on the Underground Railroad was being a conductor. And a conductor served as guides for the escaped slaves. The conductor's task was to journey to the South, help slaves break away from their masters, and take them to the North. In the slave states, conductors risked being put to death by hanging them. One famous conductor was a white man from the South named James Fairfield. Fairfield had grown up on a plantation in Virginia. His family owned many slaves. When he was a child, Fairfield's best friend was a black slave boy named Bill. James and Bill fished and swam together. It didn't matter to either of them that one was a slave and the other was free. That is the amazing thing about kids. And if you're here in the early bird classroom and you're a kid, that's an amazing thing. You really care about someone to play with. You don't care about what they look like. That's an amazing thing. And try and keep that too. Try and make sure, that you are really keeping your friends because of who the people are and not because of what they look like. As they grew older, however, they both began to understand how wicked it was that one was free to leave the plantation while the other was not. Even just a small thing like that, right? They could leave, they could go travel, they could go to school, they could go to college someplace else. The slave was never allowed to leave the plantation. Even though Bill belonged to Fairfield's uncle, the friends made plans for Bill's escape. One day when Fairfield left the plantation for a trip, he took Bill along and smuggled him all the way to Canada, where slavery did not exist. In Canada and in black communities in the northern states, Fairfield met other escaped slaves. Many of them asked him to find and free members of their family who were still held captive down south. They were even willing to pay for his help. Almost always, Fairfield agreed to help. He became one of the most successful conductors on the Underground Railroad. He lived a life of daring. Once he was shot and wounded. On another occasion, he was caught in an effort to free slaves. He was forced to serve a 5-year prison sentence in Kentucky. Can you imagine? And the prisons, I looked this up, they were horrible. They were horrible. We're going to talk about that in a different class, but probably not this one. To get inside plantation grounds, Fairfield often posed as a slave trader. He knew the ways of the South and spoke with a genuine Virginia accent. Because of this, he would often be invited to eat and spend the night in a slave owner's home. Fairfield would agree, but in the morning, he and several of the man's slaves would have disappeared. In one famous escape, Fairfield organized 28 slaves into a phantom funeral procession. The coffin the men carried was empty. Using this disguise, the slaves marched through the main street of the southern town. Once out of town, they dropped the empty coffin and raced into the woods. The most fearless conductors on the Underground Railroad were the many blacks who regularly journeyed to the South to assist their people. Most were runaway slaves themselves. On their every trip to a slave state, they faced hanging or being recaptured and forced back into a lifetime of slavery. Imagine having escaped and then always having the possibility, because of what you did, of being recaptured. That would be scary. The cleverest and bravest of all the conductors we know about was the black woman named Harriet Tubman. She was born a slave on a farm in Maryland. When she was 13, her master, in a drunken rage, hit her on the head with a brass paperweight. For 3 days, she lay in a coma, hovering between life and death. She finally awoke, but the rest of her life, she was troubled by a strange form of sleeping sickness. Without warning, she would fall into a deep sleep. When she awoke, she was unaware that she had passed out. Despite these spells, Harriet Tubman became the Underground Railroad's most famous conductor. Can you imagine hitting somebody and putting that person in a coma and leaving them lay on the floor? There she is. There's the paperweight in his hand. Those were heavy. They were very heavy because they had to hold paper down from blowing in the wind. And they couldn't blow away themselves. When she was 19, Harriet sneaked away from her owner's farm. Traveling only at night and avoiding roads, she headed north. She did this by following the North Star. Harriet had strong faith in God. Before her escape, she had spent many hours in prayer and deep thought. I had this out in my mind, she once said. There was one of two things I had a right to, liberty and death. If I could not have one, I would have the other. Most slaves would rather die than stay in slavery, right? If you didn't know that your master might hit you into a coma any day of the week. After a long and dangerous journey, Harriet Tubman arrived in Philadelphia. There she believed that God spoke to her. He commanded her to return to the South and help other slaves reach freedom. Just a few months after her escape, Harriet went back to her old farm. She brought her sister and her sister's 2 children back north with her. This was the beginning of a brilliant career. Harriet was to take more than 300 passengers on rides through the Underground Railroad. Just the mention of her name, made Southern slave owners furious. At one time, there were rewards on her head totaling more than $40,000. I have little check marks there. I think they're my sons. Harriet was a master of every trick in the conductor's trade. I miss him. I just miss my boys. I haven't seen him in a while. It just reminded me because I'm pretty sure those are his check marks. Because he did a report on this. Harriet was a master of every trick in the conductor's trade. When necessary, she dressed men in women's clothing. I just miss him, that's all. I'm sure you miss sometimes people too, right? There, now my face is washed. Sometimes we miss people, right? And sometimes I didn't expect to see his little check marks there. Harriet was a master of every trick in the conductor's trade. When necessary, she dressed in men and women's clothing. She dressed men in women's clothing and women in men's. She often stole a slave owner's horse and wagon along with the slaves. Then she hid the runaways and under fruits and vegetables and innocently drove the wagon down the road. One night, when her pursuers were close behind, she hid a group of slaves under a pile of manure. She gave them straws to breathe through. On another trip, she confused a posse chasing her by having her group board a train that was heading south. Certainly no runaways would ride a train south, and the men of the posse let the group go. At the next stop, the party of slaves got off the train and continued to walk north. Like Moses in the Bible, Harriet Tubman led her people out of bondage. Long before she died at the age of 92, she had earned the name the Moses of her people. When an escaped slave finally arrived in the northern states, his flight did not end. He was still a fugitive slave. As early as 1793, Congress passed a fugitive slave law that said owners were allowed to capture fugitive slaves wherever they might be in the United States. Under the law, anyone assisting a fugitive could be punished. In the South, slaves were expensive. A strong slave cost $2,000 or more. When a slave escaped, his owner usually tried desperately to get him back. In most cases, the owner did not pursue the slave himself. Instead, he hired professional slave catchers to hunt down the escapee. The slave catchers were crafty, ruthless men. Many of them had criminal records. Often, however, they were outwitted by the agents of the Underground Railroad. Okay, I'm going to stop there because it is time, and I really don't like going past my time. So we are on page 22, and I think we have our crafts to do tomorrow. I'm trying to decide when I want to finish the book. I think what I'm going to do, honestly, is I'm going to finish the book in the Bookless classroom, is what I'm going to do. All right? So we've got a few readings coming up in the Bookless classroom. What do we have in the Bookless classroom today? Oh, The Murder of Abraham Lincoln. So I'm going to finish. No, I think I'm going to keep this in the early bird classroom where it belongs. So we're going to finish this story tomorrow before we do our science tomorrow. Science tomorrow, we're making flowers. Why? Because science is about following directions. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Annette Feravich. We were here reading about the story of the Underground Railroad here in the early bird classroom. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you here tomorrow. Dr. Annette Feravich. I'm the teacher.